the armour of modern German tanks, except at point-blank range. The poor design of Soviet shells meant that many simply shattered on contact with German armour. For the Red Army, the first tank battles were a terrible shock. On the second day of the war, Red Army tanks met a German panzer division near Prushanyi. The battle turned into a massacre. More than 100 T-26 tanks were destroyed in just a few hours of combat. On the third day of the war, in a battle near Voynitsa, about 150 T-26 tanks were destroyed. The next day, Soviet T-26 tanks counterattacked near the town of Porshile in the Baltic. At the start of the day, the Soviet 28th Tank Division had 130 tanks. By its end, just 50 remained. The pride of the Red Army lay wrecked and smoking across the German invasion route. The German army had 4,000 tanks and self-propelled guns for the invasion of Russia. Half of them were the virtually obsolete Panzer I and II light tanks. Only 1,400 of them were the new Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks. Each German panzer division had 200 tanks and more than 2,000 command and support vehicles. A Soviet tank division had almost twice as many tanks, but fewer support vehicles. Events would prove that the Germans had got it right. Without enough support vehicles to keep them supplied with fuel, ammunition and spare parts, hundreds of Soviet tanks would be abandoned en route to the battlefield. German tank crews went into combat convinced of their own superiority. But a nasty surprise lay in store. German tanker Gustav Schroedeck of the 11th Panzer Division was in action near Radekov. He recalled, "We sent the first shell into them. It struck the turret. The second shot was another hit, but the lead enemy tank kept advancing. What was going on? We had always joked that all we had to do was spit at a Russian tank and it would blow up." Other reports began to arrive of a new model of Soviet tank that seemed to be immune to German guns. Near Rozheny, these new Soviet heavy tanks shrugged off multiple hits before bursting into the German position and crushing guns, trucks and vehicles. The only effective way to stop these monsters was with the powerful 88mm anti-aircraft guns. The new Soviet tanks were called T-34 and KV-1. They were names German soldiers would come to dread. As fighting raged along the frontier, Kuznetsov's Third Army near Grodno was the only one that managed to bring artillery to bear on the advancing German troops. Kuznetsov's troops fought the German Ninth Army to a standstill. German General Ott wrote, "Stubborn resistance by the Russians has forced us to fight by the rule book once more. We could afford to take certain chances in Poland and in the West, but not now." Kuznetsov was also the first Soviet commander to launch an armoured counterattack. The Soviet 6th Mechanized Corps had almost 1,000 tanks, including 350 of the new T-34s and KV-1s. The decision on where to counterattack had to be made very quickly. When a concentration of German tanks was reported near Grodno, where Kuznetsov's Third Army was fighting, General Pavlov decided that that was the place to strike. It was a catastrophe. The 6th Mechanized Corps was virtually wiped out. Most tanks ran out of fuel or broke down because supply depots had been destroyed by air attack. When the remaining tanks were encircled by the Germans, the crews blew up their vehicles and retreated. It also became clear that there was only German infantry near Grodno. So while the 6th Mechanized Corps made its doomed counterattack, Hoth's panzers advanced unhindered on Vilnius. German control of the air meant Soviet commanders in Byelorussia had no access to air reconnaissance. So largely working in the dark, Pavlov estimated that he faced only 1 or 2 German tank divisions. But on the third day of the war, a German reconnaissance unit was ambushed near Slonim. After the battle, a German staff officer's map was found and sent to Pavlov's headquarters. After one glance at the map, Pavlov realized his terrible mistake. Instead of 1 or 2 tank divisions, the whole of Guderian's 2nd Panzer Group, 5 panzer divisions and 2 motorized infantry divisions was advancing on Minsk and Bobruisk. All of Pavlov's forces were about to be encircled. Pavlov immediately ordered all his troops to retreat eastwards, but it was too late. Guderian's panzers burst into Slonim, blocking the only good road from Bialystok back to Minsk. In Bielorussia's landscape of marshland and dense forest, controlling a single road like this could be decisive. Other lines of retreat simply didn't exist. German panzer groups seemed to be advancing at will. Their commanders tried to find weak points in the enemy line and burst through them, moving fast and threatening the enemy with encirclement. To maintain momentum, they simply bypassed areas of stubborn resistance. These were dealt with by infantry divisions that followed in their wake. Armoured cars and motorized infantry in trucks and motorcycles accompanied the panzer columns. Reconnaissance units led the way and were the first to engage the enemy. Finally, close cooperation with Luftwaffe ground attack aircraft made this, in 1941, an unparalleled offensive force. Guderian and Hoth, commanding 2nd and 3rd Panzer Groups, were advancing on Moscow. But now they received new orders. Minsk was the new priority. Both generals were outraged. They saw Moscow as the grand prize. But both reluctantly diverted their tanks towards Minsk to help complete the encirclement of Pavlov's doomed army. Minsk had been bombed since the first day of the war. From its ruins, huge columns of black smoke rose, obscuring the sun. Now Hoth's tanks were approaching to seal its fate. First, they would have to fight their way through a line of Soviet fortifications. But when one of Hoth's divisions broke through the line, it was immediately counterattacked and its forward units cut off. Hoth's Panzer Group, as he later described, had to break through Soviet fortified positions situated on the highway amidst heavy fighting. But the tried and tested tactics of the Wehrmacht now proved their worth. A German tank platoon normally deployed in a V formation, with its 2 prongs facing the enemy. This allowed German tanks to attack on a narrow front, 50 or 60 tanks across 1,000 meters. In 1941, the Soviet division's orders stated that anti-tank guns should be spread evenly along the front. This meant 50 German tanks would only face between 5 and 10 anti-tank guns. The German tanks overwhelmed these guns by weight of numbers, then turned right and left to attack the rest of the line from the side and rear. What made the situation even worse for Soviet troops was their inadequate weaponry. Their staple 45mm anti-tank gun could only penetrate the front armour of German tanks at very close range. Using superior tactics and weaponry, the Germans broke through the Red Army defences around